Where do I even begin with this? If you love drums like I do, you'll understand the appeal of this colossal library. I've been a fan of Superior Drummer ever since I purchased my first copy of the Metal Foundry. Toontrack have come a long way since then, and while I loved the massive libraries of the Superior Drummer 2 era, I always thought it could be better. A lot of people have pit Superior Drummer 2 and BFD 3 against each other as the two titans of the drum sampling world. But Superior Drummer 3's arrival utterly annihilated any comparisons one could make with other drum libraries. As far as I'm concerned, there is no competition anymore. All bets are off, and Toontrack have virtually accomplished the near impossible. I can't possibly show you all the pristine features this library sports, but suffice it to say, this is the Ferrari 458 Italia of drum libraries. Of course, that doesn't mean you shouldn't use other drum libraries. As I mentioned in a previous video, I've discovered Riella drums to be the perfect sidekick and laptop substitute to Superior Drummer 3's often overwhelming freedom and customization. Before I go on at lengths about the library, allow me to showcase the sounds by playing for you. And just in case you're wondering, yes, I am playing with my two hands and I'm not editing the MIDI. What you're hearing is years of practice. Playing this library, especially if you have enough money to buy a top-end electronic drum kit, which I don't, is like going to your favourite theme park and hopping on all your favourite rides. There really aren't enough words to describe it. But let me begin on the features this library contains that its previous version didn't, but should have, contained. I'm going to try and fit in as much as I can in a compact space of time, so don't expect a deep walkthrough. A main element not available in Superior Drummer 2 was custom stacking. While the engine had an X-Drum feature, it was a little clunky to work with, and it didn't offer the freedom Superior Drummer 3 does. With the new library, you can quickly select a drum and the articulation you want to stack on, then pick a sound from anything in the library from Drum Kit from Hell all the way to Progressive Foundry if you own those libraries. But that's only half of it. You can then take it a step further by choosing which velocity range activates which sample. In other words, you can create your own custom velocity-based articulation drums. And if you're thinking, this is kind of like a sampler, well, you're right. What was once a drum library engine can now be used like a sampling engine. Map where you want, add different sounds to different velocities, choose how each sound reacts to your playing, and even reverse the sounds. You might not think you can go too crazy with these features, but when you remember that you can import your own wave files into Superior Drummer now, the possibilities become endless, from custom recorded Foley, industrial and metallic percussion to a fully functioning cinematic hits kit or vocal sample kit if you want. It's a little simpler than Kontact's sampling engine, but being able to use Superior Drummer as a sampler and access all of the high-grade effects, buses and sends and automatable knobs for MIDI learning, you realize Superior Drummer has gone from being a drum library to a creative sandbox. Imagine being able to load any samples you want into the kit, then connecting an electronic drum kit with a dedicated control for your kit's pads and control areas, then going nuts with it. But let's get back to the handy velocity stacking. If you've been paying attention to Toontrack's library releases over the last couple of years, you'll notice that for the snares, instead of sampling a dynamic range of velocities that go from slightly off-center strokes all the way to rim shots on the high velocities, they've opted to separate everything and provide the center drum hits and rim shots as their own articulations with extra velocity layers. You may not have realised it, but that's why the newer libraries tend to have less snappy centre snare hits at high velocities. In order to get a proper crack from the snare, you'd have to use the rim shot key separately. So now you know. This separation of articulations gives you more dynamics for centre snare and rim shot hits, and in Superior Drummer 3 allows you to stack them back together the way you want, so that the drum dynamics respond the way you want. This is how I use this feature. I personally don't like having to map multiple articulations all across the keyboard because it can make MIDI program and live playing a pain in the butt. So in Superior Drummer 3, using the brilliant core library that comes with it, I set the open kick hits to lower velocities and the stopped kick hits to the highest velocities. This actually mirrors the real performance of a drummer, where faster unaccented strokes result in the kick beater coming back off the drum head, and the louder, slower accented strokes have the beater dig into the drum head, causing a snappier, muted sound. Now the snare. I set the softer off-center hits to the lowest velocities, the center snare hits to the mid velocities, and the rim shots to the highest velocities. Now the snare reacts similar to older Superior drum libraries, but the way I want. Then I have the edge hits on the next key. Next up are the hats. There's only two articulations I'm interested in stacking here. The closed tip hits to the whole velocity range, and the closed edge hits to the higher velocities. Once again, this mirrors a real performance, as a drummer will often accent the louder hits on the edge of the hats and the eighth notes softer on the tip of the hats. I pick a few open articulations and put them on different keys, as I like having the opening states separated for more expression. So far, we've already reduced the number of keys needed by 4. It doesn't seem like much, but believe me, it matters when you're editing MIDI and trying to get a natural performance from the keys without jumping from note to note. Toms. I layer the rim shots on the highest velocities, allowing me to get even more transients out of the toms while playing louder. A handy thing. I leave the ride bow tip articulation, but I separate the bell tip and bell shank articulations to mirror the accented shank hits a drummer performs on the ride. Everything else I leave as is. Then I consider that my default patch, where I'll switch out the drums I want rather than loading a new kit and doing everything again. My own responsive drum kit tailored to my recording and playing style. And that brings me to the sound of the kits in the core library. To be honest, when I first heard the announcement for Superior Drummer 3, I thought, yippee. But then it was revealed that George Massenburg was engineering the drums his way in the perfect recording location with his own mic setup. Prepare for a silky, crisp, balanced, and easily mixable sound. It's tame, but its mild authority is beautifully underlined by its ability to growl proudly when pushed. Like I said, the Ferrari 458 Italia. It's the kind of sound that grows on you. And when you do get a chance to put it in the mix with just a touch of EQ and some master compression, you almost don't want to mix it any further because it just sounds so damn nice. For this reason, I like to mix around the drums, and then only tweak what I need to towards the end. Sure, the samples are straight from the recording sessions untouched by post EQ and compression, which means you could call these raw samples, and they are. But never before have raw samples sounded so sexy. Compare these sounds to the sounds of a library like the Progressive Foundry. Which still sound pretty damn nice on their own. And then to the sounds of Metal Foundry. rough as guts. That was a library you had to mix to put in your rock and metal tracks, especially if you were producing modern metal with a slight polish. This library sounds like an expensive recording because it is. That's especially important when you're an independent composer producing high quality sounds and you rely on high quality samples for your high quality modern productions. Speaking of high quality, it's time to tune the drums with gusto. Tuning the pitch of drums or cymbals in Superior Drummer 2 was something you'd do sparsely. If you're going for the most natural and realistic sound possible, there was only so much you could do with the tuning knob. Superior Drummer 3's tuning knob is unequalled. Instead of just pitching the samples up or down, the transients are preserved while the harmonic content is processed. This results in near true-to-life tuning, and it's done brilliant. Once again, this opens up new possibilities for drum variety, custom sound shaping, and getting the frequencies you want in the mix. I highly recommend using this knob often, as it's the equivalent of having your drummer, for example, tune their kick lower to get a big boom that sits well with a distorted bass. The control is yours. I really can't go on about everything that makes this library great. Custom rendered drum images, auto mic routing for stacked or extra drums, a bunch of synthetic and Foley sounds to layer on top of your drums along with the core library, more than 5 different ambient channels for layering or 7.1 surround sound, all the Groove and AI Drummer features from EZdrummer 2, and the choice to download and install the essential mic positions and bleed to keep the library gig space smaller. This is a drum library, a sampler, a MIDI programmer, a workspace, a playground, a sound design tool, and fuel for inspiration. Oh, did I mention it has its own drum replacement recognition tool for triggering or copying live performances? This kind of tool is often sold separately at a high price, but here it is in Superior Drummer 3 just sitting there, waiting to be utilized. If you would have asked me if I would trade all of my Easy expansions and SD expansions to have just Superior Drummer 3 in its core library, I'd have to say yes. So there.